So much. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you all had got some time to have lunch. It's already 3. Can I share my screen? Okay, yeah.
Yes, you can.
Okay. Okay, so I usually start with my story so that when I speak about people with disabilities, I speak from my personal point of view also, from my experience also. So I'm so glad for this opportunity to talk to you all about my experiences today. So I was born and brought up in a very rural village of Kannur, which is which is called Iritti, and where we got the power electricity when I was 15 years old, and then we got a road access when I was 30-year old. So that kind of a village it was. So then I studied there, and I went on to Tamil Nadu for my higher studies, and then I got a job there in Chennai as a software engineer after completing my master's in computer applications. So I was working there in Chennai for 4 years, and one weekend I came for holidays to my hometown, and while going back, I fell off that running train while returning to Chennai. So I injured my spinal cord and I was hospitalized for more than 4 years for this treatment. I couldn't go back to my home because there was nothing waiting for me. There wasn't the road access. They prescribed physiotherapy, but I didn't have any physiotherapy or physiotherapist available in my hometown at that time. So obviously we couldn't go back home. So and my mom, she said, okay, we can be in hospital so that you get some kind of a treatment. Because usually what happens is, especially in Kerala, I'm not sure about other states, but even if we don't educate girl child a lot, we always save for their marriage. So even my mother had some money saved for my marriage. So at this point of time, health was more important, so she could spend for that. We come from a middle class family, but still she could keep me in hospital for almost 4 years before I moved to Palinga. So I went on to Vellore for my treatment for some time, and then I stayed in a physiotherapy clinic for almost 3 years. And that's where I learned about, maybe I learned many things, and I learned how to sit up by myself. I injured my neck, so it was in the cervical area. So I couldn't move even my hands at that time during the initial stages of my accident. And even now, I can't move my fingers, but at least till the wrist, I have movement, so I can use my laptop, and that's how I use it. So that was a relearning phase. I had to learn to write again, how to write, how to sign, how to use a laptop. So it was all new learning for me every day. So for almost 4 years. And when I finally learned to sit up, and when I finally gained my confidence that okay, I can sit up for some time, that's when I returned to thinking about what do I do as a person. Till then, it was always the spine cord injury, and it was always the physiotherapy, and how do I do, what do I do next, all those. And I never got some time to think about myself as a person. But then, after when I learned all these things and when I got that kind of a confidence, that was the phase wherein I was trying to looking at myself as a person. From that spinal cord injured patient to that person, Ashla. Even I hadn't remembered what it was to be a person and to be Ashla, because I forgot what it was. What did I like? Did I like, I knew that I liked reading and I liked books, but other than that, what kind of books? And then while thinking back, I learned that, okay, I love to walk, I loved nature. So all these things, and then what can I do next? All those questions came up only after learning, or at least uh, after overcoming uh, the critical stages of those being bedridden. I was in the bed for always, and so I didn't know what to think, and I was thinking all negative things. But then when I at least started thinking, started sitting up, I could look at the world in a different way, that okay, there are possibilities instead of limitations. I do have a lot of limitations even today, but at least there is something which I can do. So I started thinking about it this way. I love to read, and there must be some people, all people who can't see or who can't read now, but are so fond of reading. So maybe I can go to some old age care home wherein they'll have these caretakers, people who will be helping these all people. So they will help me also for my maybe daily bath and getting into wheelchair, etc. And so I can go to these grandfathers and grandmothers and maybe sit with them, read some books for them, read some newspaper for them, because I need a lot of like personal care. Even still, even today, I need a lot of care, lot of help from other people to be in a wheelchair and to be productive. So if for me to come here and sit here and talk to you, I need like two people to shift me into my wheelchair, my mom to give me a bath and get me dressed up. So all these are help which I need. So there I need people to help me. So these kind of places there will be people to help without any additional cost. So they'll help me also, and in turn I can be of some use. It was I didn't know what that something is, but I knew that there is something which I can do which is of use to people, and without that there is no meaning to this existing, right? If I'm simply existing in this world, just breathing and eating and sleeping, what is there in it? It would be better to die. There were times wherein I really thought that, okay, you're better off dead than living like this. But at that point of time, I wasn't thinking that if only I was dead. I was trying to find out what can I do so that now that I'm living, my life is better than like just living and existing. So that was the time I started searching for these kind of old age homes or children's homes wherein I can give tuition or whatever. And finally, I found Palim India. There were a lot of people who helped me, friends and well-wishers who helped me searching for some kind of a place. And I I consider it a blessing that okay, finally we got Palim India. There was small news of uh, news saying that Parliament is starting a rehabilitation center for people with spinal cord injuries, which is called Halfway Home, which will be starting next year. That was the hardly 3 or 4 lines news, which came in a newspaper that was found by one of my aunts, and she said, okay, if Parliament is planning for some rehabilitation center for people with spinal cord injuries, maybe they will have some way to have you also there. And that's how I contacted Palim India and came into Palim India. So when I came to Palim India, for me it was like, okay, I got the best place I could be, because I got all the help which I need. I, all the healthcare needs were met, and I got an opportunity to do things beyond my capabilities. I would say, because there were so many things. I started, as Raju said, I started as Dr. Rajagopal's assistant. He taught me many, many things: how to live, how to be independent, how to, how not to, how to ask for help, how to be confident. So all those things helped me, and I finally learned that okay, there are many things which I can do. And he said that any help which I receive is not a charity, which is my right as a citizen of this country. I have a right. If I'm not able to do something, if I have a disability, I have the right to receive the right kind of care and right kind of support to be able to be a part of this society. So that's when I learned that okay, it's my right to receive that care. And if it is something, if something is your right to receive, you have a responsibility to provide that also. So that was another learning which I took from that lesson. Since he said that it's my right to receive the care which I need, it's my responsibility to provide the care which I can provide. So that was the beginning of my journey from a care receiver into a care provider. That's when I started thinking that okay, I used to think that so proudly that okay, I'm doing many things even with my disability. So it is, so I used to think of it in with high regards at that point of time, and suddenly I realized that okay, it is nothing. This is not you to be proud of. This is, you are doing your responsibility, and be grateful that you have got a chance to be in that place. So that was a life changing experience for me. So that changed the whole perspective of how I looked at what I was doing and how I looked at the people I care for. So I became a better care provider. So I started working with the very same halfway home which whose news I read, and I happened to come to Valium India. So that started after I reached Valium India, maybe in another 6 months. So I started working with Valium halfway home with people just like me who are spinal cord injured and then using a wheelchair. And then we have, as you have already seen in many other sessions, that palliative care not just end with a patient's death. We also care for family, and then that includes the bereavement support. And then we have a self-support group for bereaved people here in Valium, India. They meet monthly. Before COVID, they used to meet monthly physically in this office, and they will share their whatever their life and their issues and their grief. They grieve together, and there are people who are coming for long term so that they help the newly bereaved families, etc. So we also used to have a lot of children coming in there. So we started a children's wing for that program, because always adults talk and children will be sitting idle at that meeting. So we started getting children separately so that they can also share their grief. So I started doing these things as part of my work too. And then as a person with disability and as a person who got an opportunity to work and in a very supportive environment, I also thought that it's my responsibility to work for an inclusive society and a barrier-free environment. So I do that also wherever it is possible, to talk to people, to make them understand that okay, it's a responsibility to do things for people with disabilities. So this is my personal journey. I still use a wheelchair to move around. I can't use a manual chair, so I use a electric wheelchair which has a motor, so I can uh, navigate easily. So this is how I live currently. Yeah, like I'm just coming to my topic. That was my personal story till now. And we define WHO. This is from the WHO. So I highlighted some points, but for you to read, I'll just give you some couple of seconds to read through it. Okay, so it's an impairment. An impairment is a problem in body function or structure. An activity limitation is a difficulty encountered by an individual in executing a task or action, while a participation restriction is a problem experienced by an individual in involvement in life situations. So it's a very complex situation. And to make it very simple, I don't want you to learn this disability, but what I learned from my life is that if you have an impairment. I can't walk, but my inability to walk is not making me disabled. What is making me disabled is the environment out there which cannot be accessed in a wheelchair. If I can go to a place in a wheelchair, that place is accessible to me, and my inability to walk do not interfere into any of the activities which I can do while being there. But then if what if there is like 3 steps in front of a building, and there is a crack in the footpath wherein I on the way, so that I can't reach there. So that is what is limiting me, my society or my physical environment wherein I can't go into that place, and the attitudes of the people in the society that I don't feel welcomed. I've heard it many times wherein people talk about, people have asked me on my face, why don't you stay home instead of coming into the road? You're going to go into that, under that bus, stay away from the road. They were so rude, they were so loud, shouting at me, asking me to stay home. And there were people asking about, that was very interesting experience for me once when I went for a walk with a friend, and there was a middle-aged woman looking at us. Both of us were like chatting and then walking. I'm in my wheelchair, then another person just walking besides me. And then suddenly she asked him, like, she isn't addressing me, she's just asking the other person, asking if she has any problem with her intelligence. Is it just the physical inability to walk? And then, can she speak? Then that person said, okay, just ask her whether she can speak. And then I was smiling all through. So this is what we do. We see some kind of a physical disability and physical limitations, and we associate it with mental illness or intelligence issue with an intelligence immediately. So there is nothing wrong with like in mental illness or intelligence issues. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that our attitude is so that we connect both together without understanding that one can be without the other. So this is what we do. So the disability is something which is restricting you, and which could be which is because of the attitudes and environment, not just the impairment. Only if you have an impairment, it will not affect you if you have an accessible environment and a proper attitude of the society. And when it comes to this statement, I use it very often. And it says that, okay, disability is found to be significantly associated with higher multidimensional poverty, as well as lower educational attainment, lower employment rates, and higher medical expenditures. You will see that many times. If you want to go to a hospital, if you have a fever, you may take an auto if you're feeling very tired, or you may even take a bus and go to a hospital when you have a mild fever. But if I have a fever and if I'm in my home, I will have to get an ambulance, because nothing else. If I'm staying at home, at my home with my mom, there is nobody to like lift me from my wheelchair to another car or anything. So even even a car or auto will not help me. I may have to get an ambulance. That costs so much of money. So, and then I need somebody else to go with me. I can't go on my own to any of these hospitals. So I need somebody, I need my mom. And if she's working, it's her that day's income which is gone. So always when you see people with disabilities, we are marginalized in many ways, and then we tend to like spend more money on our all of our needs, especially with medical needs, which we cannot go without. So that's one thing. And there are a lot of disabilities which are directly connected with health. Like in the sense, our physical health is affected, and we have a disease, underlying disease, which is causing a disability. There is muscular dystrophy, there is spinal cord injury, and there are many other diseases like maybe blood related diseases like thalassemia or sickle cell anemia, all those kind of diseases which are having physical issues also. So these people, for people to access healthcare, which are very much critical for these people's life and health, there are a lot of barriers. One is like accessibility. We cannot reach to hospital easily. We need like kind of an ambulance or any other vehicle to reach there. We cannot afford to have those kind of vehicle. We don't have accessible roads to our homes so that vehicle reaches there. We don't have people to uh, carry us to the road till the road or till the vehicle. So accessibility is one of the major issues wherein we cannot why we cannot access healthcare. And another one is, as I've already mentioned, it's a high cost of transport. You can't go in a bus, you can't go in an auto, you might need to get a private vehicle, and that costs so much. And then there is a financial issues, poverty. We see in many cases there are people, middle-aged people who fall from heights while working, and there are people in mid-20s wherein they met with a road accident. Usually spinal cord injuries happen due, main reasons for spinal cord injuries are these two: road traffic accidents and fall from heights. So then there will be many times it will be the breadwinner of the home who is in an accident. So that um, income is stopped, and then the other person, the spouse, if it is wife, they'll have to care for she'll have to care for this patient who is now bedridden and dependent, so we cannot go for any work. And there are children in the family, there might be, so they need there are their expenses also, their studies and their food and their nutrition. So all these things are affected, and then if you were already in a financial crisis, then it is very difficult to come out of it. And then there is another thing which happens when you fall from a height, or when you meet with an accident. There is no question of okay, where to go. Somebody is kind of picking you up and then dropping you in a nearest hospital, whichever it is. It could be a multi-specialty private hospital, and by the time you get your surgery and acute treatment and come out of it, you've already pledged your house and you'll taken another huge loan from many people, and then you are into poverty and you are into a huge debt immediately after like discharge from the hospital. By the time you get discharged from the hospital. So, and this is a picture I love. This is one of our home visits team going. And these are the kind of terrain where we support people. And imagine you are in a wheelchair and you live in a home which has a way like this. How do you get out of this place to go to hospital? I've already told that accessibility is an issue. Even if you stay near the road, it is an issue. But if you're staying alone with somebody who cannot carry you on your hands, how do you access? How do you even think about accessing healthcare? Even if you get a fever, even if you get a chest infection, even if you get a urinary infection, you stay home. And then when it comes to disabilities like spinal cord injuries, many of the people will have an indwelling catheter during the initial period, which needs changing every 28 days. And then how do you go to hospital to get these changed? So these are all the barriers for us to access palliative care. Sorry, access healthcare. So what can palliative care do in this situation? There are many things which can be done, and especially because in a country like India where rehabilitation, we don't have any specific rehabilitation facilities available. It's a very minimal and people can't access it. There are a lot of people who doesn't even know that there is something called a rehabilitation center after a spinal cord injury. So what palliative care can do is we can include people with disabilities into its spectrum so that they get the minimum available, minimum required care, and it can also improve their quality of life. We have proved it in Kerala, not just for Pallium India, but for many palliative care centers in Kerala. They all care for people with disabilities. So I've met many people who have actually told that it was palliative care who introduced me to a new wheelchair, new way of living, new going out, and seeking for a job, all those things. So, like, those are people who are actually living independently now, but the initial help, initial rehabilitation, everything was provided by palliative care institutes. So what they do is like we have home visits, so we can include it. Is easy for us to include people with disabilities into our spectrum, so that because we may be seeing another patient the next door, so we can extend our help to that person also, if only we decided that people with disabilities who need this physical care can come under palliative care. It's only for us to decide that, okay, we are going to care for them also. So when the moment we decide that, we can do a lot of things. We may not be able to do a proper rehabilitation like Vellore, whatever spinal cord injury rehabilitation centers like Vellore are doing, but we can do many things at our home settings which are not very costly, which are not very, so we can do many things in our settings. And what else can you do? This palliative care and then health, providing health in its definition, and physical care, that is something which we can do. But what else we can do? We can sensitize ourselves to their specific issues and challenges. What are causing these people? Uh, like many of the studies shows that many people go into depression when they meet with an accident or acquire a disability. So these are the issues. And so when you see a patient, you meet a patient at home, can you identify if there is a depression in that person? Or what can you do so that he is not going into depression? So sensitize yourself to the specific issues and challenges faced by people with disabilities. And yeah, this is something which is applicable to everyone in palliative care. We do that and we have learned it. You have learned this already. But even more for people with disabilities, because most of the time we ourselves forget, like when I say we, people with disabilities like me, we ourselves forget that we are a person, and then we also have likes and dislikes. We also have opinions. We can also contribute back to the society, or even we are part of society. We keep forgetting that because we've been repeatedly asked to stay home. stay in a bed, watch TV. Because we all love people, even especially when you have a disability. It is like families treat them so well. Say that, okay, I'll give you anything, whatever you want. You want to recharge your phone, okay, I'll give you that. You want TV in your room, I'll give you that. You want whatever you want. You want books, I'll give you that. But stay home because that's safe for you. You don't have to step out to the society. So we do that. So instead of that, treat them as a person, help them find themselves, address them by their name, call them, and speak directly to the wheelchair user. As I have already told you, I've experienced this many times. They'll never ask me anything. What do I want? Once I went to a restaurant with a group of people, and then I wasn't given a menu card. Everybody else was given that menu card, but I wasn't given one. And then the next time when that waiter came and asked me, okay, what would you like to eat? I asked, you didn't even give me a menu card, and then now you're asking me for my order. And then he apologized and he got me one. But like this is something which we all do many times without knowing it, because we tend to ignore, we tend to think that okay, they don't need it, and then we ask people who are with us, what would she need? I've seen that people asking my mom what would I eat, not to me what would I prefer. And okay, this is some of the etiquettes which we tend to forget. When you see somebody going in a wheelchair, you tend to help, you want to help, and you want to do something, and then you go and push them, and it is, they don't know, and it comes unexpectedly, and then they get offended, or they get like they fall down. All those things happen, and then you feel offended because they are not accepting your help. So it is not, we all consider it as our wheelchair is something which we use to move around. So uh, going over the years, it becomes like a part of your body. Like this specs which I wear, the wheelchair is also becomes a part of my body. So when you touch or when you want to move it, ask whether you need help. And then if I say that, okay, I need help, then accept it and give it. Otherwise, please don't go and push anyone's wheelchair. Okay, yeah, and talk to them as you would to anybody else. So I have heard of this many times. People want to know what happened to me, and it is not even before asking what my name is or how do I feel or why am I in a place. What do you do when you meet a new person? So you talk about, okay, where are you from? And you ask that person also, what do they do? What do they like? And we talk about climate, we talk about politics, we talk about many things, and we don't get into their uh, personal things much. So it is same as it is same with the person with disability also. Before asking, okay, what happened to you? Can't you walk? Not at all. You use a wheelchair always. How do you bathe? What is how embarrassing it will be for somebody if some person come and ask you, how do you bathe, or how do you get dressed up? So same way with me also. Maybe I depend on my mother or a caregiver to get dressed up and take a bath. That is there, but still you coming and asking me personal, like in public, how do I get things done? It is so offending many times and so embarrassing too. So please don't do that. Yeah. This is something which is very important. When you go and meet somebody in a home-based setting, like we don't, disability doesn't mean inability for decision making. It only means that my disability only means that I cannot do certain kind of things, physical things. I can't take things pick up some things. I can't walk. I can eat only with a spoon. There are many things which are limiting myself, but that doesn't mean I don't have my own opinion or I don't have my own wish. So respect what people's wishes are, what their opinions are. Ask for them. They may not be able to always articulate it well because they're so used to staying home and then used to people ignoring them. So ask them openly, what do you prefer? What do you think about this? What do you want in this particular situation? So that they are able to take some decision. Whenever they are not able to take decision on their own, help them take those decisions. Shared decision making is always very important, because without considering me, if you just take a decision for myself, that will not be helping me much. You may not know what do I exactly want when you take a decision for myself. Okay, when you come and talk to me, I find it very difficult to look up and talk to people. So sit with me, talk to me in my own level. I may not be very good at, I may not be an educated person like you. I may not be a very good with, I may not have seen this world like you. I may have a lot of difficulties and limitations. So come to my own level, please, and talk to me, especially when I'm sick and I'm disabled. I don't have that much of a motivation and encouragement from the world to do things on my own. So I depend in many ways. So come to my own level, help me from there. And this I've already told you, ask before you try to help. I may be a very independent person also, even though I use a wheelchair, I could be on my own and I'm very independent and I can do things on my own. So I may still need some help, but please do ask me whether I need that kind of help or what kind of help do I need, and then help me. Okay, so I stop here and maybe we will hear from you before I speak something else. I'll just stop sharing this. Ah, you were here. I didn't see you, Smriti. Hi.
I snuck up on you. But
Okay,
thanks,
so
Ash. Yes.
I'll wait for the questions, comments, your reflections on what I said, and if you have anything more to add. If you have any experience with disability, people with disabilities, have you seen them, work with them?
Hi, Ashla. This is Vandana.
Tell me,
Thank
Anand.
you. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm sorry I'm not able to start my video, poor
That's okay.
connectivity. So, what you said is the inclusivity of people with disability is so important. I see this a lot while dealing with cancer patients. There are sometimes amputees, there are people, wheelchair bound, and to make them feel as a part of mainstream, I think is extremely important because they are as we are, and that onus has to come from us because, like you said, there are certain limitations, there are certain challenges that people with disability cannot do. They have so it is for us to make them a part of the mainstream. And what you shared. And the inputs that you gave, something like a wheelchair. So yesterday I was at Tata Hospital and somebody in a wheelchair came. They were not able to maneuver through the door. So my first instinct was to push the wheelchair. I didn't seek permission. Honestly, I didn't seek permission. So today, after hearing from you, I'll remember that yes, I need to seek permission before I touch the wheelchair. So thank you so much, Ashla, for sharing that.
Okay, thank you, Vandana, for sharing that. Yeah, especially when you have a lot of health issues also, you forget who you are and you need help from others to get out of it and come to society. Okay, anybody else?
And also, I would like to share a small, personal incident. My father was diagnosed with late muscular dystrophy. The onset started post 50 years. And because in India, we still don't have a system where people in wheelchair can easily, without any inhibition, without any restrictions, can move around. So for him, it was a huge challenge because the awareness in India is still very little. There are no ramps. There are no places, a washroom which people with disability can use comfortably. So I think in India we still have a long way to go, but we will get there someday. I'm hoping we'll get there someday. And we need more
Yes,
institutions like Pallium India
I'm hoping
that can
to.
make. Yeah. Thank you for inspiring all of us, Ashra.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I see a question from Mosmi. Is there anything or any behavior of any person till date make you very sad or disturbed? Not now. Like it wasn't easy to be in that position where that person shouted at me, asking me to stay home. Why don't you stay home? You're going to go under that bus. Look, she was only scared that I meet with another accident and bus hit me if I don't like see it. So I could feel that fear from her, or she was not very comfortable seeing somebody like me outside. So it wasn't purposefully done, but still at that moment, being there in front of many people and somebody shouting at me and someone asking whether I have any problem with my intelligence or is it just ability to walk, and all those were difficult situations, but I don't carry it with me for many days. Maybe it will disturb me for one day sleep and then I forget it because I can't do anything about it. All I can do is like talk to people like you and then maybe like write about it, talk more about it so that people change their attitudes and hope for the best. So I do that wherever it is possible, but I don't carry it with me. Okay. Thank you, Rajni, and thank you, Parul. Any other questions? Not just questions, any comments on anything, any personal experiences you would like to share? Thank you, Vandana.
This is, yeah, I'm Prasanna here. I
Hi.
had a good experience with my, at least I used to call him uncle. He's my close friend's father. His name is Major V.T. Nair. So
Mhm.
December 2018, they diagnosed that he had a sarcoma. He was operated. Then he developed a limp. And two things I understood from that. One, he's a military person. I call him Papa. And because they were as close as to me as my parents.
Okay.
And he never wanted to use a support when he walked. So he would prefer to either take a slow step, like a baby step, or have a small limp, but to use it's not a crutch actually, but you have something that comes up to your wrist, right? It's a band where you hold in and like a stick you would hold as a support to keep your,
Walking stick.
yes, something like that.
Okay.
And by 2019 March, Auntie Kamalam Nair was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease, and they were in Chennai. They are Chennai based. So I used to keep company, meaning I used to be the filler for one of the primary caregivers, and I in the hospital, and I used to do all my dissertation work from the hospital. And that's when I really understood what you spoke now, because I'm a person who will observe, I'll want to help, but I'll always wait for the help to be asked, or I would ask, should I help? And I would sometime see him looking at me, asking me for the help in a very indirect way for him to open the door.
Okay.
Only through the eyes and not verbally. How I would know that he's asked for the help is he'll say, thank you, beta, because I opened the door.
Okay.
And otherwise, it is like what you said. Treat me as I was Uncle Nair before I had this issue. Don't make me any different, because I'm as capable as I am as I was. And there is no, I like the confidence. So I don't want to be part of trying to help him or extend my hand and make it look either artificial, or I needn't show my concern outwardly like that. Just side with no words is absolutely enough. So uncle taught me that in many, many ways. So I can really appreciate. I had to be his chauffeur, but I shouldn't be driving. Look at the beauty, no? He would, I have to sit by his side, but I'm the chauffeur.
Okay.
That was the deal made. And he had issues. So he forgot the phone. He left his phone. Auntie called me to say, first thing, he's left the phone, but you'll have to remind him to take his medicines first. And I was waiting for him in a location where he and I spoke the previous day. So with the phone, he's coming. I need to wait for him. I waited. He came just like how Auntie said. I asked him to take the medicine. Then he told me, I forgot the phone. I had to, the deal made was that he will drive and I'll accompany for his work. That was a beautiful experience I had. And I wrote a note also on it. My day out with Major V.T. Nair. As he was when I had been in college, when I was a student, when I was in 20s, that's when I met him. Now I'm in my 40s. He's still the same. Nothing had changed. So I can really appreciate what you said. Whatever I did was unintentional, but now I understand. Thank God I did what I did. And otherwise it could have been offensive, especially for somebody like Major, who's been in the army. So, thank you. I learned something new from you today.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you, Prasanna, for sharing that. But for all of you who are listening, I would also like to share something. When you see me now, it is 10 years after my accident, and I have learned many things over these years. But if I had been at home, my home, and just after the injury, and if with my mom, and if you happen to visit me at my home as a palliative care person, I wouldn't have been in this situation. So you will see many people who are depressed, who needs help, who is not ready to ask for help and all those. And if you just listen to them and observe them, and then if you can extend that one help which they are required at that point of time, but still they are not ready to ask in a way which is not offensive, which is not paternalistic. It would be like you are giving them an opportunity to come back to their own life. So you may see a lot of people like that also. So at that moment, think that their life also has a lot of value. It is every human life is valued. So you will be able to give them some kind of a help, so that you can get them back to some kind of a normal life, and then some kind of a life with dignity. So that is also possible when you go as a palliative care person to somebody else's home.
Oh, one more that I would like to share, if the time permits. Yes.
Sure,
Yeah, this I experienced with my father. He was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, and slowly the ability to walk was a restricted walk. He walked, but it restricted, and I used to be scared. So, being a doctor, again, you have more of knowledge which are not required, and fear also sets in. So, I always anticipated what happens if he falls. So that thing, no, what Smriti used to call as that as being over vigilant. I never knew this term then. I was 24/7. Even in my sleep, I used to be vigilant that I was a shallow sleeper. That if he walks, immediately I'll get up, thinking that something would happen at that point when he gets up. But he would navigate with the moonlight. He wouldn't want his daughter to be disturbed because I was a primary caregiver. So all the lights, the entire house will be dark, and he would navigate himself in the dark. For 1 hour, he'll have a walk. He'll go and he'll sleep back after having whatever he wanted to have. He did fall later on. He did have a fracture, but I would say until that fall came, no, he was actually fine. I was the one who would be like, my heart would go in jitters and flutters, and I think I have offended him many times, as in what you said, no, how people have hurt you. I have hurt my father many times. He wouldn't want help, and I would ask him whether he would want help. I would keep an attendant forcefully, like a spy. He would walk about 50 feet away from my dad because my dad didn't want it. I wanted it. So that's another takeaway from what you said today. I could appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Parul has got many comments in the chat box. Would you like to unmute and share?
Yeah, Ashla, first of all, hats off to all your accomplishments, and may you add more feathers to your cap as years pass by. Yes, we encounter so many people here at Leprosy Project, where I work along with the Cancer NGO also. And it's a wonderful model set by our founder. And persons with different disabilities are coming together and working for a common cause, that is eradication of leprosy. It's a very tall utopian task which our founder had, that is world without leprosy. And seeing, these patients, I won't call patients now, because they have over the years set an example. In spite of all their personal problems, they come over and they have learned. Somebody is an my own assistant, personal assistant who works for me, is a multiple sclerosis patient. But imagine when he joined, he was just 12th standard pass, and he hardly could utter any English sentence properly. But I used to constantly, motivate him that he can do it and he should go through and appear for the degree examination. Today, I'm really proud. With all his willpower, he's gone through that. He's done his MBA, and he is one of our key person, resource person now. So, that keeps, we are really proud of all of them. And we have a support group where, the moment we go, they want to together, share their experiences as to how, it's nothing grand that I'm doing, but just the very presence to listen to them, what problems they had, especially COVID times, to travel all the way. The patient whom I said, one with the polio, he was traveling all the way from Dombivli to San. It's not less than nearly an hour and a half to reach the project. That itself is a daily challenge for him. So I really, and I feel that they are much more capable and they teach us. So many times people say, how you work for cancer and leprosy and all. I feel I am learning daily from them. It is not I who am giving. They are giving me something to live for,
Yes,
So hats off to all of you. And
thank you.
great. I would really like to keep in touch with you, Ashila.
Thank
Wonderful
you. Thank you.
motivation. Yeah. As you were speaking, I just forwarded, I just took a pic and forwarded it to my assistant. So he was also, yeah, happy that what it is, we celebrate the World Disability Day every year in the project. And this will always remind me, this session, that
Okay.
how you have overcome things. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Ashla. Yeah. And Pallium India is really every session, it's like you meet your beloved. Pallium India is like that. Every Friday, my heart beats aches to reach out to the session is a wonderful thing. Thanks, Smriti ma'am, for making it so interesting.
Thank you, Parul. Ashla, do you want to continue, or shall we invite more responses?
I would like to hear from the participants. Like all I wanted to add was like, okay, maybe like you all will see a lot of patients like this if you decide to include people with disabilities into your case spectrum when you go for palliative care. So uh, at that point of time, maybe the help which you give at that moment may help uh, somebody else coming out of their disability and their limitations and live a meaningful and fruitful life. Because it was only because I got that kind of a helping hand at the moment which I need, I could come out of it and do. Now I do things which I love to do and I live a happy life and meaningful life. So this is, all these were possible because I got this opportunity. So whenever you meet somebody there who are, could be depressed, could be very dependent, and could may not be motivated at all at that point of time, but still if you could help and if you could lend a hand, maybe tomorrow they will come out of it and live a better life. So I only had that one point to remind everyone.
I think while while we're on the topic, we also must remember the different kinds of disabilities that people live with. Also, people uh, with visual impairment or hearing impairment and so on and so forth. Um, One point I would like to raise, which I think is a pertinent point to this, is the idea of autonomy and what autonomy means. So I'm just going to ask people to either put your response in the chat box or unmute yourselves. What does autonomy mean? So um, autonomy is one of the ethics that we follow in healthcare. But what does autonomy really mean in terms of, I mean, just as a word in general? So I'm just going to wait a couple of minutes to elicit some responses. We've talked about autonomy in different on different platforms and also in other sessions, and I just want to bring it up in this particular case because in this particular session because there is another layer to autonomy that I would like to discuss briefly with the group. Right to take decisions regarding oneself. Thank you, Mosmi. I find it very disconcerting to look at a screen full of names. I wish more people would turn on their cameras. But yeah, okay. Moral independence. Any other understandings? Freedom to take decisions. Thank you, Elna.
Hi, Smriti.
Hi.
For me, autonomy would mean the right to speak for oneself and to be able to take informed decisions.
Okay. Thank you, Vandana. Thank you, Linda, for turning on your camera. Nice to see you. Freedom of self-governance. Giving competent adults the right to take or refuse treatment, specifically in the context of receiving treatment, individuals' ability to represent oneself. So I think, yes, we've got most of it. Autonomy is really, yeah, like you're right to, make decisions for yourself in line with what you want, in line with your own value system. Autonomy is something that is very tricky, especially in the healthcare in India. And before I come into specifically the angle of autonomy in people living with disabilities, I would just like to draw attention to how autonomy is treated even in people not living with disabilities. When somebody falls sick, or when somebody is not well, what happens typically in a household is that we start treating the person like a patient, and we start doing things for them. We give our advice, we influence decisions, we sometimes coerce people into treatment options that perhaps they are not entirely comfortable with. And certainly we find that especially in older adults, people who've been independent or who've had some control over their lives, we take away their decision making capacity, because somehow when someone is living with a condition, or is living with an illness or a disease, um, their ability to make decisions for themselves is greatly impaired. We do this with good intention. We do this with good intention because we want them to feel better, not strain themselves, not be stressed. But I'd like you to think about what autonomy means there. And how often do we keep people autonomous? Or do we go the other way and start making decisions on their behalf, or telling them what's good for them? I mean, take any situation. If you have a cold, how many people, if you just have to tell somebody you have a cold, 9 out of 10 people will give you advice, right? On what kashayams work, what dose of paracetamol to take, how many times to gargle with salt water, do a steam inhalation. So with more, I think, complicated conditions and illnesses, that level of advice also goes up. And of course, we then come into the purview of the healthcare system, where the doctors and physicians and everybody else starts making decisions for us. I'd like you to apply that to now people living with disabilities. What is autonomy? What happens there? If somebody is physically unable to bathe themselves, or to feed themselves, or to or need help with activities of daily living, where does autonomy come in there? What happens to autonomy? It's not a comfortable question, and it isn't meant to be a comfortable question, and it's okay to not answer also. But there are no right or wrong answers. We're all learning together. So this is just a question I'm going to park. Having parked that question there, I'm also going to say that even a fully dependent person can exercise autonomy if they are given the platform. Ashla, I'm going to ask you to comment on that, please.
True, Smriti. The moment you depend on somebody else to get a bath, you're treated like an infant. You don't. You're no longer a 31-year-old who can think and talk and express wishes. You're just given everything. That's there. It's out of love most of the times. People don't understand what they are doing. Like, they want us to have everything. They'll push their TV to your room. They'll give you everything you want. I have had one person. He's like told me this story. Like, whenever he's sitting somewhere, thinking about something or looking at something, his mother will come and ask, your mobile recharge is over. Do you want me to recharge? Because that's what she could think of, because he's sitting alone and thinking about something. The moment she's so worried that, okay, your mobile is off, that you are thinking of something else. So let me have your mobile on and then let me recharge. So they think about what you think, they decide on what you need. So all these happens, and especially when what happens is when you express a wish to work. Why do you want to work? Like, we are providing you everything, and then now, like, what am I not giving you? And they kind of get offended because I'm giving you everything, and I'm struggling to provide you for all these things, and I'm not worried about my health. I'm doing this for you in spite of all this, and still you want to work. What do you want for? So these kind of questions, it's very difficult in a, especially when you are a caregiver or care receiver. That's very tricky. But as a healthcare provider, it's something which you have to we have to educate ourselves and be very mindful about, because at home it may be very difficult, but at least in the professional settings we should be able to provide that. That means a lot to that person.
Thank you, Ashla. And I want to also just highlight that autonomy doesn't just apply to what we can do for ourselves physically. It's also the decisions we make for our life in terms of what do I want, how should my assets be handled, how should, where I want to, how my savings should be handled, where I want to spend money, where I don't want to spend money, who I want to visit, all of those things. Now, I saw some very pertinent remarks from Rajni, who said that still mentally capable of making decisions. So I guess we need to ask for permission, what is allowed, what isn't. We need to take cues. Yes, we need to take cues. And I would say the thumb rule is, would you be asking this or doing this for a person who is not in a wheelchair? Would you be, is this how you would conduct yourself with somebody who's not living with a disability? If the answer to that is no, that's your cue that something is not correct. So we like Ashla said, we tend to infantilize people, which is really also not just a challenge to their autonomy. It is also um, taking their dignity away. Now, all of us as human beings, we want to be contributing members. We want to have a role, or that we we contribute in some way that's meaningful in some way. It could be the role of a mother, it could be the role of a successful entrepreneur, it could be any such role that gives us meaning in life, that makes us feel like we have contributed to society. Now, if I take away somebody's ability to contribute, that is a massive disservice that I'm doing them. So what Ashla said is, why do you want to work? Everything is taken care of. Why do you want to work? Because that's where creative expression lies. That's where the ability to be independent lies. That's where dignity, self-worth, self-esteem, all of those things lie there. So just because somebody has everything taken care of does not mean that that's what they want exactly. So I've said this before also, that I was told by my therapist that the golden rule is do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. But the iron rule is never do for others what they can do for themselves. And that is something that I think we all need to remember, because that's where dignity and autonomy really lies. So so that's something I just want to place there, because while it's easy to celebrate, it's very easy to celebrate people like Ashla. It's been, of course, it's been a remarkable journey, but like Ashla said, I don't think this is the Ashla we would have seen 4 years ago or 5 years ago. So so to honor that journey also. There are many, I remember Ashla telling me once that you couldn't go to a restaurant across the hospital because there was a 3-inch high pavement. And that is enough. That's like a fortress wall, isn't it? So these are the things that we need to think about, rather than just, I don't know, we can, of course, it's one thing to be kind and one thing to be empathetic and all of those things. But I think all of us have a role in changing the system. And like Ashla said, no one is disabled. It's the environment that causes the disability. So just a couple of things that I wanted to place on the table. And when I said that autonomy can be fully exercised by a person, even if that person is fully physically dependent, yes, some of you have said ask for their permission. Permission is one thing. Ask for what they value, what they would like. And you might be surprised that they want something completely different from what you assumed. And that's okay. So yes, I'm going to stop that part of the discussion now. We have 10 more minutes. Ashla, anything else?
Yeah. That reminded me one thing, Shruti. I had so many people coming and asking me, what kind of a movie would you like to watch? And all of those days, my answer was, I don't like movies much. I love books. But people never ask me what would I like to be there for a holiday or to have some time for myself. And then like they all assume that it is something which what people like is going to malls and movies and outing. But for me, it was so different. I just wanted to be in some kind of a nature and then read some books or watch just some birds or like flowers. That was something which I love to do. But people assume that okay, something a holiday or an outing meant that okay, going into the city, watching movie and going to restaurant. And they simply ask me that question instead of asking what would I like. So that your comment reminded me of that.
In our communication section, we talked about leading questions. So lead people to the answer that that we hope they will give.
And easier.
Yeah, and easier. It's also easier, I suppose. Yeah, I agree, Rajni, that people want to feel that they're helping in some way. But what is help? Is it something that we're doing to feel good about ourselves, or is it something that is actually relevant to the person that we are saying that we are helping? And firstly, a lot of the times there is a sense of uh, I would say almost it is a sense of paternalism that comes in, because there's like, I'm here to help you, therefore I am more powerful than you. Therefore, so these are things that we need to be mindful of when we interact, not just with people living with disabilities, but anybody living with any sort of vulnerability that puts them in a position that is, for the moment, weaker in some ways than where we are. So that, I think, Ashla, thank you for reminding us of choices and how we sometimes frame the question to reflect our own choices rather than the ones of the people that we're talking to. Paternalistic is the word, yes, it is. I try to avoid, I end up using it a little too often in my, in my thoughts. Yeah. Even something like, where is the furniture placed, right? Where is your bed placed? When I remember a person in Delhi whose a friend's grandfather who was very sick, and this is a man who had retired after being very high up in the Indian Navy and all of those things. And when he fell sick, and when he was not all there, he wasn't lucid very often, but he had this room, he had the best treatment, all of that. He came back home, and it was a palliative care doctor, Dr. Mary Abraham, who went across to see him. And the first thing she said is, can we just move his bed closer to the window so he can look out? And a lot of his restlessness actually came down after that. And it came from her interaction, from her observing him, from her realizing that all he saw, because he couldn't really get off the bed, so all he really saw in front of him was a wall. So years of her experience had taught her that maybe he needs to see the sky, or maybe he needs to see the tops of trees. And so small adjustments in the environment, small things like that with the person's, that's also shared decision making, with the person's involvement in that decision making process. So yeah.
Can I share something here, Smriti? So
Yeah.
my dad, his muscular dystrophy was progressive. I mean, Smriti just spoke about somebody knew who was from the Navy. My dad, a war veteran, onset of late muscular dystrophy after 50 years. So I had gone with him for his checkup. He was on a wheelchair, so I was maneuvering around the wheelchair. He had to get on an examination bed. He insisted that he would do it on his own. He said, I am going to do it on my own, in spite of the fact that it was a Herculean task for him. It took 10 minutes to do it for a task which for the others would take 10 seconds, but we let him do it. And the feeling of achievement thereafter. And the doctor who was to examine him, I'm getting all goosebumpy thinking of Papa like that. And the doctor who was examining him said, hats off to your willpower, and I'm glad you did it all by yourself without any help. So that's the kind of, I think, autonomy everyone with a disability should be given. We may tend to care by showing our concern, and we could have actually lifted him and put him there. But when he said, I want to do it on my own, that right for him, till it reached a stage when he couldn't, and when he would have said that, may I seek help? We are allowed, I mean, he not allowed is a wrong word. He chose to do it by himself. So I guess that's an example of giving autonomy to a person with disability.
Yes.
Sorry, please, after you.
Yeah.
It could be the opposite also. I have a friend who's having a cerebral palsy, and he cannot, like, he can hold the spoon, but it's very difficult for him to like feed himself with that spoon, because all his concentration will be on not spilling the food, and end of it he'll not enjoy eating it. So he always says that, okay, feed me. So he prefers to be in that way. And then there are many people always advising you should try eating yourself. You should learn to feed yourself. And then he gets so like irritated and frustrated by those comments, because like he tried it for many times, and he can't enjoy the food, and he loves it when people feed. So it is not always like people doing it on their own. It is about what do I want, and whether I have a decision making power at that point of time, whether you respect my wish and grant that. That is also important.
Yes, very right, Ashla. For my father, it was a simple act of wearing his socks when he had to go out. It would take him for so long, but though we were very concerned, we would hover around in such a way that, so that he wouldn't take a fall, but we would allow him to do it on his own. I mean, allow is a wrong word. Again, I think allow is a very wrong word, because as somebody who loved him, the allow, it automatically comes as, yes, we are giving him the right, but whereas we saw him do it on his own, I would say.
You made space for him to do it on his own.
Yeah, correct. You are coming up with all the right words, Smriti. Thank you for that.
No problem. I think it's not just restricted to people living with disabilities. We do this with the elders in our own families, even people who don't have disabilities. And I remember someone actually telling me that, we feel that just because a grandmother or a great grandmother, great grandfather, whoever, the oldest person in the family is living with the family, they're not lonely. People can be lonely even in a joint family if we don't give them, if we don't respect their personhood. If we don't.
On state suicide prevention strategy, we had experts from Pan India. We had Dr. Alok.
So that's something that I think applies across the board also. So thank you, Ashla. This has been a truly, I think, as always, a remarkable session, and I think a lot of very actionable points that you've shared with us. And I think you've clarified so many ways, both simple and not so simple, that we can start incorporating into our own behaviors, into our own attitudes. And it is an attitudinal change. It's not about, small things like not moving the wheelchair or things like that, but it's a whole attitudinal change. after which a whole lot of other things, our language changes, our behavior changes, our general perspective changes. So thank you, Ashla. I can't thank you enough for taking this session today.
Thank you, Smriti. Thank you for this opportunity.
Smriti, can I add just one thing?
Sure, Shreya.
You said, no, it's not just with people with disability. We start with our toddlers. We'll want them to walk, but we wouldn't want them to fall. Without falling, how will they learn to walk? So we'll be constantly going behind them to hold them before they could fall, or we'll be having a side wheel so that they shouldn't fall from the cycle. This, we did it to our son, and he learned cycling only when he was in the 10th grade. He learned it from his Raki sister, who was then doing her 4th grade. Because the cycle used to be small, where he can have his foot as a balance till he got the confidence. So as you said, no, there's always a conflict. We want them to do things, but we want to be behind them. They should not fall, they should not get hurt, this, that, then nothing is going to happen at all. Thanks a lot, Smriti.
Thank you, Shreya. Actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because that gives me a chance to highlight an important issue, which is very often people compare older people with children, and it's not a fair comparison uh, for many reasons. Children have their whole lives ahead of them. They need to learn these skills. They need to learn, to navigate life. Older people have lived out their lives. They come with a lot of experience. They come with all of that wisdom. So there is a bit of a tendency in a lot of cultures where, again, we infantilize older people, and the expectations cannot be the same of the two groups. So Shreya, thank you for flagging that. And I think when we have a session on the elderly, that is something that we will also definitely cover in more detail, because we've also run out of time now. But thank you all. Please do give your feedback, and we'll see you next.